Hey everybody, thank you for watching Leaf by Leaf. Today I continue my Haruki Murakami series where I am reading through all of his novels from start of original publication date to finish with Killing Commentatori. And today is a little bit different. This is the fifth novel published in 1987, Norwegian Wood. To be honest, I have actually read this once before. It's the only Murakami I read. And I loved it when I read it the first time, I think 2.5 years ago or so. But people, around me have been raving about Murakami, talking about all this surrealism and bizarre narratives and plots and so on, and urging me to read it. But I decided at the time that I would start with this one. And I picked it at random, not knowing what to expect other than the predispositions people had given me based mostly on, it seems, Kafka on the Shore and Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. And this one ended up being completely different. This is complete realism. It deals with very serious topics, most notably mental illness, but memory, youth, love, growing older, change, unrequited love, and ultimately death. And it does so in a very raw realism that sort of gutted me the first time I read it, and continued to pierce here in the second reading. Right off the bat, I'm just going to go ahead and give this 4 stars out of 5. The previous 4 novels I've not managed to give more than 2 stars out of 5. But this is obviously a complete change of pace for Murakami. In fact, in Jay Rubin's translator's note at the end, it talks about how this novel would actually be the one that catapulted him in Japan to sort of a megastar. And it actually sort of depressed Murakami, and he was living in Greece and Italy at the time he wrote this, and then moved to America in 1995, and it would be a while before he could go back to Japan. He sort of closed himself off from all of the publicity that was expected of a major novelist in Japan at the time. But it stands in stark contrast to the previous 3 novels. Now, there are some similarities. There's lots of listening to jazz and classical records, lots of consumption of food, like we've seen. These characters somehow drink something like 17 cups of coffee a day, and then a bunch of whiskey, and so on. But this protagonist, Toru Watanabe, and you'll have to give me grace on these pronunciations. This is him as a serious young college student in Tokyo, around 1968 to 1970, when he turns 20. And so it follows, it starts off with him as 37, and it stages this gloomy, pensive atmosphere. He's looking out over the Hamburg airport, and it's a cold November, dense cloud cover. Everything had that gloomy air of a Flemish landscape. The ground crew was in their rain gear, and so on. And then, right off the bat, as if Norwegian Wood, as the title from a Beatles song, didn't tip you off or enough, he wants to continue this link between music and memory that we see in the previous novel, Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World. And it says, "The melody never failed to send a shudder through me, but this time it hit me harder than ever." And he's talking about Norwegian Wood, and we'll figure out what that's linked to. There's also universal emotional appeal in this novel. He says, "Dark clouds hanging over the North Sea, thinking of what I had lost in the course of my life. Times gone forever, friends who had died or disappeared, feelings I would never know again." And these are things that we all relate to. Murakami in this book is not giving us some crazy madcap conspiratorial plot with sheep and unicorns and so on. There's none of that. Like I said, this is a complete change of pace. And I really, really like this, and I hope to see more of this kind of writing as I move through his repertoire. But yeah, there's this shift. He goes from that cinematic style to this moody, almost depressive mode, which can be hard to stomach. If it weren't for the fact that he creates these full, complex female characters. The protagonist, Toru, he's pretty much the same as every first-person protagonist I've read so far in these first 5 novels. He's just this laissez-faire, resigned, normal guy or whatever. Just sort of matter-of-fact and deadpan and abnormal amounts of self-control for a young guy. But then there are these 3 relationships, most notably Naoko, and then Naoko's friend in the sanatorium, Raiki, and then back in Tokyo, Midori. And with each of them, there's this, you meet these wonderfully, charmingly complex female characters that really impressed me with Murakami. Because so far we've just seen these kind of thin male fantasy characters. And true, there's a lot of male fantasy in here. However, it's forgivable here because Murakami has this character that he's inhabiting who is a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, and then ultimately 20-year-old guy away from his home and in college. So there's a lot of coming of age and sexual awakening and so on for some of these characters. There are longer chapters here. We actually get people's names, as I've been saying. I think the last book, Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World, I don't think a single character had a proper name, and almost all of them do in here. The book owes a lot to F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, and in fact, this has impressed upon me to go and read that immediately. In fact, I'm going to probably read it tonight. It's been a while since I've read it, but Gatsby is an overwhelming source for this book, as is, to a degree, Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain, which the character reads several times. And indeed, in here, there is a sanatorium up in the snowy mountains in Japan. Like I said, mental illness features prominently in here, and it is done in such a way that there's a real sadness, a very genuine authenticity, if you'll forgive the redundancy, that really cut me to the core and impressed upon me the weight that mental illness can bring and suicide and how it affects others. One of the strongest elements of this book, which again owes to The Great Gatsby, is love closed off without any closure. Basically, these entangled, strong, loving emotions that then see one of the party cut off from the couple, from the relationship, in such a way that there can be no closure. There's just these lingering feelings of love, and indeed the intensity of first love on top of that. The pacing in this is a lot slower. It's almost 300 pages, but it slows you down to give you a sense of time and the depths of what's going on here. And as the pacing flows along, the relationship between Naoko and Toru becomes more and more attenuated, thus giving you the sense as a reader that you're holding something, you're holding a story, and beholding a story that is very delicate and is to be taken seriously. One of the most sublime moments in this book that really, for me, came out of nowhere, and shows me that as an imaginative writer, Haruki Murakami does have a place, in fact. And it says, "I twisted open the lid of the jar and took the firefly out, setting it on the 2-inch lip of the water tank. It seemed not to grasp its new surroundings. It hobbled around the head of a steel bolt, catching its legs on curling scabs of paint. I moved to the right until it found its way blocked, then circled back to the left. Finally, with some effort, it mounted the head of the bolt and crouched there for a while, unmoving, as if it had taken its last breath. Still leaning against the handrail, I studied the firefly. Neither I nor it made a move for a very long time. The wind continued sweeping past the two of us, while the numberless leaves of the Zelkova tree rustled in the darkness. I waited forever. Only much later did the firefly take to the air, as if some thought had suddenly come to it. The firefly spread its wings, and in a moment it had flown past the handrail to float in the pale darkness. It traced a swift arc by the side of the water tank, as if trying to bring back a lost interval in time. And then, after hovering there for a few seconds, as if to watch its curved line of light blend into the world, it finally flew off to the east. Long after the firefly had disappeared, the trail of its light remained inside me, its pale, faint glow hovering on and on in the thick darkness behind my eyelids like a lost soul. More than once I tried stretching my hand out in the darkness. My fingers touched nothing. The faint glow remained just beyond their grasp. This is a sublime moment, and unlike anything I've read in Murakami so far. And it so powerfully and metaphorically touches at the feelings going on in this novel of the extension of the fingers trying to grasp hold of something so fleeting, that it sealed it for me. That comes on page 46 of 300. And if nothing else, you could stop there. But it does go on. It ends so beautifully, if so tragically. Yes, it's a tale of first love, but also much more than that. It transcends itself. Murakami transcends himself, and touches at universal feelings, and in such an incredible way, with simple language, but the most perfect, searing, lucid details that perfectly support what he's going for in this tragic tale. This is a standout novel. I highly recommend it, and I hope that there is more of this as I continue through his novels. Next up in this series will be Dance, 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 which came out in 1988. And by the way, I made a mistake with Hard-Boiled Wonderland. I think I said that it came out in 1991. It actually came out in 1985. So I apologize for that. Anyway, Dance, Dance, Dance is next. And it is apparently a continuation of the Rat series, a follow-up of A Wild Sheep Chase. So we'll see what he can do with that. I suspect that that's going to be quite an abrupt shift from Norwegian Wood. So I'll probably end up reading Don Quixote between the two to put some time in there. So thank you all for watching. I hope you're enjoying the series of reading through Haruki Murakami. And thank you for watching.